Oh, algorithm gods, please bless me.
Demolto! This will bring in the numbers for sure.
Oh god, what are you typing now, Melone?
My blog on why part 3 is the worst part of JoJo, of course.
What? Are you out of your fucking mind? Don't post that in public!
What's wrong, amico mio? For someone who has an ice-cold stand, you sure can't handle a hot take.
I'm not worried about your shitty take, Melone. If the boss finds out that one of us hates part 3, he'll kill us!
Risotto? He wouldn't hurt one of us.
Our other boss?
That's just a silly rumor. The boss must have more of a fiery temper than you.
I do not have a temper. Wait a minute. The part's called Stardust Crusaders, right? But the main team doesn't give themselves a name. Why? Why is it called Stardust Crusaders if they don't call themselves that? Why not just stick with heritage for the future? Do they think I'm stupid? It pisses me off!
Here he goes ranting again. I'm updating the blog.
Wait, don't!
And done. Occupied. Oh no.
Hello? Let me call him again. Please pick up. On second thought, I think I'll just head back home.
Oh boy, hot take city incoming. I don't know if this is going to be a long video, honestly. I assure you, saying it's my least favorite part does not mean it's subjectively the worst part. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is a long-running series that spans over the course of 9 parts, with parts 1 to 6 being in the original continuity, and parts 7 through 9 being in a new continuity. And everyone has their favorite characters, favorite villains, and of course, their favorite parts. And they also have their least favorite parts. Don't get it twisted. I love every single JoJo part, just some more than others. This isn't a rant video on part 3. I'm not like those NPCs that say, duh, part 1 boring, duh, skip to part 3, duh, part 4 was filler, duh, Stone Ocean mid because Jolene's weak, duh, JoJo has like 5 fans. No, every JoJo part has something to love and appreciate, and I think all of them are pretty good. Some are just better than others. They evolve as you go through each part. If you want to know my ranking for the JoJo parts, I have Steel Ball Run at number 1. A lot of people has it as a favorite. It's a no-brainer. Number 2 is Vento Oreo for its non-stop action and great character dynamics. Number 3 is Diamond is Unbreakable for its setting and great villain. Number 4 is Battle Tendency for its intense battles and story. Number 5 is JoJo Leon for its somber mystery. Number 6 is kind of a tie between Stone Ocean for its crazy stands and great lead, and Phantom Blood for being a short and sweet tragic story. And last place is Stardust Crusaders. Arguably the most popular JoJo part of all time. The part that was supposed to be the last JoJo part, but ended up changing the series forever with its iconic main character and the introduction of stands. And when I started the part back in 2017, a lot of people called it the best JoJo part, or when it started getting good. And you could tell those guys were anime onlys, because we all know that part 7 is the best part. Actually part 9 is the best part? Bro, that part just started. You clearly have no taste, whatever. I was so excited to start part 3 to see the whole story with Dio and this new JoJo. But I had a lot of concerns. Why was Hamon being removed? Why is Dio not showing up until the end? Why is this part almost twice as long as parts 1 and 2 combined? Why is his character gone for a long time? Why is his character getting more screen time than him? Why doesn't Jotaro show more emotion? Is he going to be my least favorite JoJo? Of course, my opinions have changed since that was 7 years ago, and I have all the answers to them. But part 3 has still remained my least favorite part. And I had multiple friends question me about this. One really loved part 3, probably because he had a lot of memes on his page about it, and because he loved Jotaro, and because he knew him from Jump Force. Oh god. Another really loved Jotaro. One saw it as a part you could just get put on the background and not care for because of the villain of the week format. Small message to him. Always pay attention to JoJo episodes because you never know what's going to happen. You know who you are. And one had part 3 as his favorite parts, and he kept bagging on me for liking part 1 and called it boring, like your casual JoJo fan NPC. He also called part 4 a filler part. He also indulges and loves JoJo more through memes than discussing the actual show. He also complained to me about how Jonathan died. Then I caught him admitting that he only watched 2 episodes from part 1. It's almost like that some people that don't like part 1 don't appreciate it for what it is and make false claims because they skipped it, were expecting stands, or weren't paying attention to the 9 fucking episodes. Sorry, I almost lost it there. I am the greatest Phantom Blood enjoyer. Anyways, let's get into why Stars Crusaders is my least favorite JoJo part. Thank you to Burst27 for voicing Ghiaccio and Astro News for voicing Melone. Voices are in the description. You guys were so good! Oh my gosh! Number 1, the length of the part. Oh boy, this one shocked me when I came across it. I watched JoJo on Crunchyroll back in 2017 and only saw a few anime at the time. One of the reasons I got into it was because the first parts were only a few episodes, but told what it needed to tell for its episodes. So when I got to part 3 and saw that was 48 episodes, I was overwhelmed. The thing with part 3 is that it's a lot of 2-parter episodes, starting with Emperor and the Hangman. They also include anime-only scenes as well. I think what they were going for was to split the non-Egypt and Egypt halves into 2 24-episode seasons, especially since part 3 is the most popular part. Heck, that's even reflected in its budget. Part 3 looks so beautiful in its beginning and appealing right next to part 5. You can tell the quality went up from the previous season just from the first episode. I wouldn't be mad at the whole 48 episode thing if it weren't for the length of parts 4, 5, and 6's anime episodes. Now I heard somewhere that Araki got involved with the anime around Diamond It's Unbreakable, but nothing confirms that he influenced the episode counts. That being said, part 4 and part 5 have 39 episodes, while 6 has 38. And if we look at the manga side of things, part 4 is the longest JoJo part of the original continuity, with 174 chapters, then 6 with 158 chapters, and part 5 with 155 chapters. Where does part 3 sit? Below 5 with 152 chapters. It's great that they learned to condense parts despite them removing scenes I would love to be seen animated. It just brings up the question of why did they have to make part 3 around 10 episodes longer? Why is it 2 seasons? Like, I get the reasoning of using an even seasonal number of 24 episodes to split part 3 into 2 halves. It's 2 arcs. But like, why so long? Could they have not made it like 40 episodes or 39 episodes, or probably split into 20 episodes each season? 8 episodes doesn't really make a difference. Yes, 8 23-minute episodes do make a difference. And I usually don't watch long-ass anime. The longest I have probably watched is Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, but for something to be a long set of episodes, the story and characters have got to keep me hooked, which is what I loved about parts 1 and 2. Even though I can read and watch part 3 now without skipping episodes, back then, and I'm almost ashamed of saying this, I skipped some episodes because some were pretty uninteresting to me before. Which was a huge mistake because even in some uninteresting episodes, important events happen, like Anne leaving the group after Wheel of Fortune. I skipped the episode halfway and was like, wait, where's Anne? Where'd she go? Then I had to go back to the previous episode and watch what happened. Never skip a JoJo episode, no matter how boring. You don't know if you'll miss out on key events. And once I got used to the formula, I just look for some episodes with cool concepts and titles like Anubis, rather than choose ones with seemingly lame villains like Wheel of Fortune. David Productions must have learned the lesson from this for making the layer parts shorter. For a season to be 48 episodes and just use the villain of the week formula rather than building a compelling story like Fullmetal Alchemist or Death Note. For the manga side of things, Araki wanted to use all the tarot cards for their stands. He wanted part 3 to be like a road trip, where they encounter new villains on the way, and wanted to keep the story flowing with important events so people don't get bored. I think he did a decent job with the key moments, but some stands dragged it down, and the anime length didn't help at all. Maybe cut it shorter, but like 10 episodes would have helped. And speaking of Villain of the Week, number 2, Villain of the Week, Simplistic Stands. Since this part is a road trip, the whole basis of the story is for the Crusaders to face new villains through each location they visit, raising the stakes as they get closer to Dio. I enjoy JoJo the most when they have fights that can affect the plot in significant ways. That's not to say that layer parts have filler fights that I don't care for or are insignificant. But even some encounters come back in crazy ways, like Josuke learning the thumb shoot technique against the rat stand coming back in the fight against Kira, or even fights like Clash and Jumping Jack Flash, showing off 4 characters that deserve screen time. Another problem with part 3 that I'll mention later. I enjoy reading the fights in the manga since it feels faster to get through, better pacing. The thing with part 3 is that many of the fights feel like filler in the sense that they don't really affect the plot much, nor do they have events that will come back to the plot in significant ways. Anubis is a great fight but doesn't impact the story. I love Whole Horse, but he kinda has an unceremonious leave. There's 2 Boingo fights that don't add much. Fights like Forever and Death 13 only affect the plot and having no group ending up in their next location. Speaking of, some of the stands in part 3 don't compare to the later parts because they're simplistic. This isn't a bad thing, mind you. It's just the reason why I put the other parts above 3 because they evolve what stands could be. You could tell Araki was experimenting and getting used to what he wanted stands to be like in this part. Many of them are just Fire Stand, Sword Stand, Evil Sword Stand, Bug Stand, Fish Stand, Evil Ship Stand, Evil Car Stand, Water, I Steal Your Stove, I Steal Your Soul, but Gamer. And most of these fights I really love watching. It's just when you compare the creativity from this to a stand that can turn you into a mold if you go lower than your current position. Wow. And then I have to rank part 3 lower. Number 3. Some characters need more screen time. This one irks me the most. In part 3, there are characters that we follow on their journey. I believe Jotaro gets a good enough screen time since he's the main character and has a lot of badass moments. Joseph is the leader of the group and does get a fair amount of fights in this part despite being old. He's also the funniest character right next to Polnareff. Pol, in my opinion, is a character that steals the show. And I mean that in a bad way. Many people joke about part 3 being Polnareff's bizarre adventure, and they are exaggerating. Polnareff gets a backstory on his introduction, has to be the comedic relief, and gets 12 important fights right below Jotaro's 15 fights. Results may vary. Joseph gets like 5, because he's already served the main character role before. Kakyoin gets like 7, Iggy gets 3, though that's probably because he started as a gag character, and Avdol only gets like 5 or 6. Which is pretty annoying for these last 3 characters, because in order to keep the readers hooked, Araki took Kakyoin, Iggy, and Avdol away from nearly half the parts, only to bring them back again and kill them in the end. Like, what? They barely get enough screen time compared to the others, and to be honest, when first watching part 3, I wanted Polnareff to be the one who dies since he got so many good moments that it seemed reasonable for him to be killed. But nope, the one that don't get enough fights end up dying. And some of the fights I included in the counts kinda don't count as fights since they end up only doing one thing before being beaten. I wanted Avdol to be more involved because he seemed to have a cool design and demeanor. I could only cope with him being my favorite because he was the black guy. Even some fights they could have had him in, like have Avdol try to fight evil Polnareff, or Kakyoin be involved with Yellow Temperance. And both of these characters have a problem that I'd like to mention next. Number 4, fake out deaths. Oh boy, these annoy me a lot. Avdol having a shocking fake out death that built Polnareff's character, even though Polnareff still acted a bit confident in situations after Avdol died.
Polnareff, weren't you listening when we told you not to go off on your own?
Seriously, we talked about this earlier. Jotaro, tag along and keep him out of trouble, would ya?
And I was glad to see Avdol come back because he didn't have too much screen time for us to get attached to him. And then he has one major fight before he dies again. And he only did one major attack against Vanilla Ice before his send-off. Don't get me wrong, it's still a shocking and sad scene, but it still feels like Avdol was a wasted character if he got brought back just to be killed off again quickly. And during the Vanilla Ice fight, it was a period of denial for Polnareff and some viewers until it was confirmed that he was actually dead in the end. Iggy has a fake out scene in the anime after his fight with Pet Shop, but is saved by the boy, only to die a few episodes later. It's a nice scene, but just feels weird that they added it when the manga didn't have it. Kakyoin doesn't really have a fake out death, he's just taken out half of the story only to die when he comes back in the final fight. And Joseph has a touching and somber death that I really loved. Him saying goodbye to his grandson and after thinking he was losing to Dio, but seeing that he's capable is remarkable. But nah, he gets brought back to life. And what really made me annoyed was that he had a fake out in part 2 and could have died like a badass in part 3 after telling Jotaro the secret of Dio's stand. The scene where he comes back is funny and does bring some happiness to a bittersweet ending, but it just feels like I lost an amazing send-off to a great JoJo character, showing how he grew as a person and in the end would die to protect Holly and believes in his grandson. But nah, he gets to live. Again, Jonathan, your pure soul gets to die, but your grandson, he gets to live twice till the age of 100. I guess that's a good thing? No, who knows? Maybe I'm just jealous that Jonathan didn't get to have a long, perfect life, and Joseph was taken by the Joestar curse of dying young. Speaking of Part 2, number 5, not building off of Part 2. A lot of people say Part 2 is kind of a filler part in of itself because many of plot points like the Pillar Men don't get mentioned again, and I strongly disagree with this, and this is another reason why I tell people not to skip JoJo parts. Well, besides if you just don't like a JoJo part and you want to get to the next part. Part 2 is an important part to watch because it builds off of Part 1, and answers the questions brought up in Phantom Blood. The most important question being, who created the stone mask? Cars did. A lot of people say that certain parts of JoJo are filler because they aren't brought up ever again in Part 6, the final part of the original story. And that's more Part 6's fault rather than those parts, and I wouldn't blame Stone Ocean for being like that because Araki wasn't planning on Part 6 being the last part up until he created Made in Heaven. I can't say the same for Part 3, since in a JoJonium interview, Araki was planning on making JoJo a trilogy and ending it with Part 3, which can also be why he wanted Jotaro to be a special Japanese character. He wanted to start it off with Dio having begun in the second part, then return as the main and final antagonist of the third part. My problem with this is that the only important things that get brought up in Part 2 is Joseph being able to use Hamon, and that he lost his hand. No Pillar Men are mentioned in the story, Lisa isn't brought up after her part, so we have to assume she probably died. We don't see her new husband either. The Zeppelis aren't mentioned again until Part 7? But that's in a different continuity. And many other things. I'm not asking for these things to be brought up into the story in a significant way because Araki clearly wanted to write Part 3 without feeling the need to bring up the past. There's no need to bring them up in the plot. And heck, there's a whole new power system in JoJo. But it feels so weird when the series was originally written to be a trilogy, and the second part feels so non-existent in the final act. It feels like you only need to know about Part 1 for Part 3, but for Part 2 you don't need to know much. Part 1 and Part 2 feel connected in building story elements, while Part 3 doesn't build off anything off of Part 2, besides Dio and Joseph maturing. Though Joseph kind of matures over the course of 60 years off screen. But since Part 2 is connected to 1 and answers questions, I say to never skip JoJo parts because you never know when they build upon previous details. Like how Part 5 expands on the stand arrows from Part 4 and their origins. Speaking of Dio, number 6. Dio. So Araki wanted to build Dio as his final boss with the ultimate stand power that Jotaro and the others have to beat. You don't get to see Dio until the end, though his returning face reveal is done perfectly, oh my goodness. In order to know Dio as his looming threats, you need to watch Part 1 to know how much of an evil force he is. Dio here doesn't do much besides sit in his mansion, acting mysterious around his league, and talking to Jonathan's body. These scenes do make him threatening with how he talks, doesn't show his face, and foreshadows his stand. I just wish we got to see the group interact with Dio more before his final fight. Because he only really seems to keep his menacing composure for the first 2 episodes, up until he sees Jotaro move and stop time and goes crazy in the last 2 episodes. Dio's presence as a menacing villain is built on Part 1 instead of Part 3 itself, which makes sense since he's the only antagonist to appear in multiple parts as of now. But I want to see more of the guy rather than other minor villains stating how loyal they are to him and how evil he is. I can't complain too much though, since this critique is the least offensive one, because the build to the Dio's World arc still paid off. Just wanted to see Joseph, Jotaro, and Dio interact with each other more, since he had been waiting 100 years to get rid of Jonathan's descendants. Though Jotaro probably wouldn't care and bash his face in. Could have given me more of my baby boy Dio. Number 7, and this is the final one. Character dynamics. The best aspect of JoJo are the characters and how they interact with each other. To get attached to the characters and make them seem more fleshed out in the world of God knows what, will make the audience, including me, enjoy their dialogue and feelings to certain characters. How Speedwagon goes from thinking Zeppeli is a lunatic that Jonathan shouldn't follow, to actively helping him out and caring for him. How Josuke, Okuyasu, and Koichi feel like a bunch of high school teenagers that look out for each other and get into crazy, wacky, noisy situations. How Team Bucciarati have a certain acceptance of Giorno and treat each other like family. There's a lot of character dynamics in JoJo. For Part 3 though, the first large group in JoJo, I kinda don't get the same feeling. Now, there are some character dynamics and parts that I really love that we barely get to see, like how Abakio may interact with Mista, Rohan and Okuyasu, Hermes and Weather Reports. She barely knew him and is bawling her eyes out, what the heck? Actually, this is the major problem in Part 6 and Part 3, but this is a video about Part 3, so we'll stick with that. Most of the character dynamics in Part 3 don't really feel fleshed out. The only ones that I love are Polnareff and Avdol, Polnareff and Iggy, funnily enough, Polnareff and Jotaro, Jotaro and Joseph, and Polnareff and Kakyoin. Wow, would you look at that? Almost all the dynamics I mentioned have Polnareff in them. Ain't that something? It's almost like so much time is spent on him and not the others. Man, no wonder Araki has you as a favorite. Okay, let me not try to sound like a hater here. I tried to think of the other character dynamics when writing the script and was shocked at how much of them were Polnareff-centered. Kakyoin was made to be a foil to Jotaro, not only with their stand ranges, but with how they dress and act. Jotaro in the beginning is seen to be more brash and rude to others, while Kakyoin acts more respectable and virtuous to others. They do have some nice moments together, but just a few scenes isn't enough to make me like their dynamic. Araki wanted them to be friends but give readers a sense of distance, yet this achieved more through Kakyoin being written out for a while, and having him ponder about his friends rather than the interactions between him and Jotaro. Kakyoin has a great episode by substituting as a mentor for Polnareff and Avdol dies, but this dynamic isn't shown much besides probably Death 13, I guess? Heck, we don't even get to see Polnareff's reaction to Kakyoin's death. Kakyoin and Joseph and Avdol, I can't really say there's a connection there. For Avdol, he's written to be the second-in-command character, but in my opinion, he doesn't stand out from Joseph since they are supposed to be the serious navigators of the group. He's a serious cool mentor with a sense of humor when he returns, clashing with the serious cool mentor, who's supposed to be the comedic relief. That clashes with the other character that's supposed to be the comedic relief. I'm hoping what I'm saying makes sense and I'm not just nitpicking. Heck, even Araki himself said that he should have made Avdol more important to the story once he finished writing it. Possibly give him a backstory. Though hopefully he wouldn't have been shoved in at the final chapters like Kakyoin's backstory because of the Part 3's constant stand battle structure. Avdol and Jotaro don't really have a cool connection nor with Kakyoin. Or even Iggy, the dog that he captured in New York. I don't really dislike Jotaro for not being open to the characters because, well, that's his character, he's the lone wolf. Though he does get anxious and care about his friends, I think the manga does a better job at this. And finally with Joseph. I want to see more thoughts about him worrying about his grandson on their journey to Dio, but their dynamic isn't as jarring as the other dynamics. Araki did a decent job with them, but I kinda want to see more. I can go on with more things that make Part 3 my least favorites, but I think these reasons make a good point as to why it is. Some other points are probably how I don't really like the anime color scheme with the group when Avdol leaves. Like, it looks weird seeing black, yellow, green, and silver together. I wish we got to see more of Whole Horse. I think the 90s OVA did some better pacing, all that. But don't forget, I love every JoJo part, and think that each part has their own perks. I love some more than others because of their pros, and rank some lower because of their cons. I don't think there's a worst part. But tell me what you think about Part 3. Do you disagree with some of the stuff I said? Comment, notification bell, that subscribe button, and keep that aura blazing.